So this is a GoD video I'm making just for fun, just for myself, just to do something different than writing up a list, because honestly I got kind of bored with doing that. And I'm too lazy to make another Doom map, if we're being real. If you like it, any part of it you think is good, that's natural talent. That's hard work, that's a spark of the divine, that's all me. If you think it sucks, if you have criticism, if you have any kind of issues with the video, it seems sloppily made or thrown together, that's not my fault. That's forces of evil trying to keep me out of the Akashic record. Just factors beyond my control. Don't bring it up to me. There's nothing I can do. As far as the actual list goes, most of the games on here, they could go up or down a few places. I'm not super married to the position. It took me quite a while to figure out exactly where to put them, and it doesn't really matter. I would not think too hard about where they're at, except for maybe the game at the top, or if it helps me win an argument, then I'll move them up or down. That's also very important, winning online arguments. I'm not going to try to spoil anything on purpose, but just a warning, I'm also not going to not try to spoil anything on purpose. So if you care about any of the games that come up, or you don't want to be spoiled and you're really sensitive to that sort of thing, I would say just skip ahead. You're probably not going to miss out. So just a bit of a heads up on the structure of the video. We'll start with a list of everything I've played this year, either credits or, if that doesn't make sense, at least that I played enough that I feel like I could talk a little bit about it. Feel free to skip past it. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not the cops. I will be present in Duat when Anubis weighs your heart. But, take that as you will. Following the scroll, we'll do some honorable mentions real quick. Then we'll get down to the list. It will be in descending order, because if you make your top 10 list or any sort of similar list in ascending order, what's the matter with you? It's insulting. It's insulting to the list. It's insulting to the idea of lists. It's insulting to the idea of showmanship, and it's cowardly. What are you afraid of? That if you don't get your favorite game out there first, people won't finish the list? Grow up. Have a little fun with it. Show a little fucking spirit. Put some backbone into it. Have it at the end. Make them build up to it. If they want to scroll ahead, hey, be there with me at Duat when Anubis weighs their heart, and we'll see what happens to them. But don't compromise your list for their sake. Do it correctly. It's worth it. As a bit of a personal aside, it's kind of how I thought about this list as I was putting it together. I'm really just going to kind of talk about each game and a thought or two I had about it. There's plenty of lists that are like, hey, this was fun. It had good graphics. I liked, the story, and that's cool. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not kind of what I was interested in writing, as it turned out, once I started doing it. So that's not what you're going to hear. If you don't, again, I can't stop you from closing the tab. If you do that, I win and you lose. So go forward with that knowledge, but can't stop you. All right, let's get to the big list of games. These are all the games I finished this year. There's about 50 or so. 50-ish, depending on how you want to count. This counts games I played for the first time, replays, stuff that, doesn't really finish, like multiplayer games or kind of endless games. It counts games that I played partially and sort of intentionally quit because I either didn't like it, or I was like, I've seen enough. This isn't going anywhere. But it doesn't really count stuff that I kind of didn't finish but wanted to, and then still kind of sitting in the middle of. So that's the criteria to get on this list. Honorable mentions. Felvidek. I don't know if that's how you say Felvidek. I had it spelled wrong for most of the writing process too, so via con Dios myself with this one. But I've really come to love these kind of short-form RPGs that do something a little weird, a few hours long. This one has a great aesthetic, great soundtrack. Combat's pretty fun. I'm not educated enough to tell you whether or not sort of the era-specific language is accurate. I am educated enough to tell you it's kind of a fucking sick game. and has one of the best jokes of the year, in my opinion. So, shout out to Felvedek. Sorry, we're closed. Swick is just a gay survival horror with unsubtle metaphor about relationships and healing from them. You get to shoot in first person, the blood is pink, there's demons, like, I don't know. This is the kind of thing I play, just, it's good. Late homework. Late homework's just a nacho cheese ink ribbon, survival horror snack. You just hit it up, couple hours, you're good. Aesthetic is great. It's like, what if a cat girl forgot her homework at school, but the school is also in Silent Hill? Hard not to be charmed by it. Give it a go. Give it a go. It's like $2. Shut up. Honestly, it's worth the price of entry just to see the Silent Hill mirror with the cat girl looking back at you, tired, forgot her homework, and you're like, yeah, I've had this dream. Usually the fear is less specifically monsters and more like, oh my God, I haven't done this homework assignment and I don't know where the class is, and also I've never been to the class and I don't know what the subject matter is, and I don't know how to get there or also what time it starts. And if you've also had this anxiety dream, my pro tip is get a master's degree, because then halfway through the dream you'll start realizing, oh wait, I already have higher education. I don't actually give a fuck about this class. And then you wake up and you're like, ha ha ha. System Shock 2 Remaster. System Shock 2, still good. Shodan's House of Horrors. You run around picking everything up. You level up your guy. What's not to like? As I said elsewhere, with the remake of 1, I think I like that remake a bit better than 2, but they're both still bangers. And 2 does have multiplayer, which is sort of fun in its way. I don't know that I would go out of your way, but it is kind of neat. The remaster being on consoles is good, because at least maybe some youths will be shaken out of their Bioshock-induced haze and realize they can ask for better. Void War. If you go to the store page for Void War, you're going to think, this is FTL, man. Like, this is just FTL. And you're right, that's what it looks like. But, hold on a sec. Because you'll also say, isn't this like store brand 40K? And yeah, it's also that. They put them together. And it's good. It's a good time. It's fun. It's got... It in all of my favorite kind of mods, they're always the gonzo ones that go, add way too much, and some of it just doesn't work well, and some of it just kind of, is there for no reason. And this is sort of in that vein. I would say that it hangs together a bit better than that, but there's new systems, there's magic, there's more kinds of enemies. It's a good game. The only reason it's not in the top 10 really is I just didn't play it enough this year. But if you like FTL, but you're like, what if I could win by making the enemy ship just stink until everyone in it was dead? They got you. Deadlock. So this year, my friends and I started taking some trips into the Cursed Apple, just on a lark, and Deadlock's pretty fun, even in its early stages, It exists in a larger project, like this video, of me trying to allow myself to be bad at things and still enjoy them, and to be clear, I am very bad at Deadlock, but it is a good time. It's just shooting Dota, but it's still pretty fun. If you like lanes and last hits and, there's a boss in the middle that you try to kill to get ahead, then it's for you. Just get in there. Shut up. Elden Ring, Night Rain. Our last honorable mention is the most honorable mention. None of this last but not least shit. This one is the most honorable. No question. I really like this. I like a weirdo multiplayer. I like a game that takes assets from another game I liked and tries to reuse them in a clever way. I like that it's kind of stupid, like the concept of a Fortnite-ass 3-player Elden Ring, 40-minute run is sort of dumb on paper, but it's fun. It works. I have a good time playing it, and I have a good time playing with friends, and usually with randoms, which is a pretty big achievement. I think the big bonus is that they can't fucking talk to you, which goes a long way. The other thing that I like about Night Rain is that it's a multiplayer game in the year 2025, 2026, whatever year you're listening to this, in which there is no FOMO. There's no compulsion to keep playing. There's nothing for me to miss, really. There is just, you play it when you want and you stop when you want. And sometimes the game gets updates, but they're there when you get to them. And it's kind of nice to not have that background of like, well, you got to play this week or else you won't get enough shifting earth points to get the reindeer costume for the Undertaker. I would get that costume though. I would get that costume. Hades 2. In my book, Hades was always the least of the Supergiant games. I still liked it, but didn't hit as hard as, Bastion did when it first dropped, or Transistor. That was always my favorite. The roguelike part was fun, but it got thin pretty quickly. It felt like runs got solved. Once I started winning, I didn't really stop. Gamer brag. Even escalating the heat system, it felt like, there wasn't a lot of density to the roguelike. There wasn't a lot of meat to it. I was just playing to advance the story, and kind of once that stopped coming, especially when you get to the point where you have to grind for the epilogue, I lost interest pretty quickly. Not a bad game by any means, very high quality. Supergiant is good, but it just didn't land for me as hard as a lot of their other games did. It was a lesson in myself, though, in that, I spent the duration of Hades, doing a run, moving the heat up, doing a run, moving the heat up, playing to win, playing in this very ruthlessly efficient manner in which I took the best upgrade for my build. I focused on, what I knew could win, what I was comfortable with. The heat advanced every run, but like I said, but slowly, one or two at a time, going up a very comfortable upward slope. And so, while, like I said, I didn't find it as engaging, especially once I got a little bit into it, some of that's on me. Part of it is just that I didn't try as hard to challenge myself as I could have. Hades 2, in the gameplay sense, is a huge improvement. I found the roguelike side to be a lot better. More density, more choices to make during runs. The builds were more interesting, and there was more, levers to pull. And, despite that, I don't think it was still, it's far from my favorite roguelike. I played it pretty obsessively in, the week or so before the 1.0 drop, and the couple weeks after, I put 50, 60, 70 hours into Hades. I was playing it all the time. For, about a month-ish, it was one of the only things I did. I even came back to it after I had put it down, having completed it, seen the ending. I kind of burnt out and didn't finish some of the post-game story threads, but about a month or so after the launch, they released a patch to quote-unquote fix the ending, make some changes to the writing, and so I used the in-game sort of progress reset to roll back and experience the ending again with the lead-up and stuff, including their changes. And arguably, in my opinion, probably not worth it. I still had an okay time playing Hades, and I think their writing changes were improved over the original, but I don't think it really addressed sort of the really fundamental problems I had with Hades 2 as a piece of writing and as a story. I found that, by the end, I was still playing it to fill out logs, to complete quests, to kind of check boxes, and because I was enjoying the game, but the story was just kind of there. I was following out of mild curiosity to see what would happen, but I didn't care too much about most of the characters or the overall plot or the outcome. It really failed to hook me, even more than Hades 1. And that's not to say a lot of the characters are charming in presentation. They are, acted well. They have good bits of writing, but it's just the overall package felt a bit been there, done that. And it felt very safe, which is sort of my overall issue with Hades 2, is that the whole thing felt very safe in the end. Lots of good improvements, lots of great iteration, but not a lot to be seen that's new, which is disappointing for me personally as someone who's enjoyed Supergiant's games for the past little while, to see them kind of just return to this well and just iterate on it. It's hard, it's hard to blame them. Hades was a huge success. Hades 2, I'm sure, is an even bigger success. It's made them tons of money. I'm not going to knock Supergiant for, striking while the iron's hot, and maybe they loved working on Hades as well. Both games are far from bad. I'm not knocking them for going back and making a sequel. Personally, I would have liked to see something new from them, and I hope we do after this, because, I think that their talent as a studio is kind of wasted on a sequel that's so direct, like Hades and Hades 2. But I only buy the games, I don't make them, so they can honestly do whatever the fuck they want. However, personally, and the reason it kind of gets to to grab onto the bottom of this list is, despite my disappointments, Hades 2 was demonstrative of personal growth. Perhaps even a way that might be thematic to a lot of the stuff both games are about, in that I found myself, in comparison to the first one, where I was very focused on winning, very focused on efficiency. This time I was like, hey, here's something I haven't taken I need for a quest. In comparison to the first one, this time I was completely like meta-focused and experimentation-focused when it came to playing. I was like, oh, there's something I need for a quest. Does it work with my build? No. In fact, it might kind of shoot it in the foot a little bit. But let's see what happens, because I need to take it eventually anyway. Why not now? Oh, the game wants me to raise the difficulty several notches to do this? Sure, let's see how that goes. Oh, I'll restrict myself to only the weapon of the knight that gives the bonus as a bit of an extra challenge. I'll never use one that's not that, or I'll only use them if I have some kind of specific objective in mind. So there was a much more, like, let's kind of meet the game on the things it's asking me to do, rather than strictly trying to be like very methodical, very grindy about just making slow but always guaranteed progress. I was like, oh, I'll lose some, but who gives a shit, right? Who gives a shit if I win or lose a Hades run? Although, to be clear, I won most of them. I'm very good at video games, but I'll let myself lose sometimes because, got to keep yourself humble, got to keep yourself hungry. But that, kind of thinking through that over the few dozen hours I spent with the game, was sort of my best experience with it outside of the games. What the game actually presented was just being able to track my own personal growth against these two very similar games and say, oh, since the drop of Hades 1, I personally have seen myself reach goals that I set for myself. And because the games are so iterative, it was made very clear to me that I could say that I could mark progress in a way that was difficult, as I'm sure many people listening to this, and by many people I mean no one's listening to this, the games Hades 2 iterating so much on Hades 1, being a very safe sequel, did allow me to mark progress in a way that left less room for me to refute it to myself. I could not go and say, oh, well, the game was different, so it hit me different, or I approached it, differently, or I, this, that, or the other, to my brain to say, oh, you didn't make progress, you just, there's some other thing, some other reason to not give myself that win. But because of the relative disappointment here as a game, as a new piece of art, it did allow me to work as sort of a diagnostic tool for my own personality, which is maybe a strange way for a game to make it onto a top 10 list, but whatever. I can do what I want. Aliens, Dark Descent. When I tried to recommend this game to people, I have tried and failed often to describe it in a way that sounds any good. It's like a real-time XCOM, but you just control one squad, and they shoot automatically, but also there's stealth, and you put your guys in cover, and there's a time limit, and your guys can die. Sounds cool, right? This is the thing. It comes together to make a really tense, compelling tactical game, and any given mission, any given session has a really thrilling oscillation from moment to moment, with the combination of, the usual completing the objectives of your mission with the aliens, ever-increasing hunt tracker where they get more and more aggressive the longer you're on a mission versus, your location in the map and the stress levels of your Marines and their available supplies, and it's is a really impressive melding of survival horror and real-time tactics and this property, Aliens, to just sort of create this very unique thing. I can't think of something else I've played that is quite like it that's out there. Maybe that something exists. I've played your real-time tactics, your Commandos, and your Shadows Gambit and tactics, but I haven't encountered something that really kind of just blends together in a way like this. Even recording footage for this video, playing the first mission out again on New Game Plus, I was just immediately compelled back there, entering the buildings, searching each room you enter for stuff to take, and even though you control your Marines as one unit, you tell them to pick up, and one Marine will go do this, and you order them to cover, and the rest will go take cover while that one finishes their task, and then another one can hack a door, and then, you can see on your motion tracker the aliens nearby, and you've kind of got to balance, when you take fights and when you avoid them, and so it's just a strange game. To give a little bit of context, you are assigned objectives to do in a mission, just like any XCOM or other kind of strategy game, but you are not required to do them all in one go. At any point, you can extract your soldiers, return to base, have them rest, heal up, pass a day, which does things like advances research and heals wounded soldiers, and also advances the game's clock, which can lead to story events, and there is the overall timer to finish the game. And so when you approach a mission, your soldiers arrive in their APC, which has a big gun on it. And so when you start, you're outdoors, your soldiers have clear lines of sight, the APC is there, and you feel very, very powerful. Even large waves of aliens are usually very manageable. And as you kind of burrow your way into structures and deeper into this facility, you become more cramped. You lose access to your APC's weapons. You lose access to, easily being able to see for very far. And it gets more tense, which is pretty common for a horror game or an aliens game specifically. But for a strategy game, it's a feat, I feel like. I can't say it's unique in all of games, but this Aliens Dark Descent nails it. With the sort of combination of how, aliens, the xenomorphs, as everyone knows, are fast. They're good at running up to guys and then biting and killing them. And your guys are Marines who are good at standing somewhere and shooting at the aliens. And so that mismatch of who's good at moving versus who's good at stopping also creates, a lot of interplay between who's strong when. It's just a lot of systems interact in very compelling ways, in a way that's like, again, I've looked around some. I have not found a game that precedes this in a meaningful way that seems like a version of this that's like, oh, here's the game that was like this but kind of sucked, that they built off of and made this. For a first attempt at this is an incredibly well put together set of ideas. They all really glom together well. The only real disappointment is that the missions and the objectives and the aliens are relatively static. So there's no way to like an XCOM campaign in which you can play, multiple times, and because of the proc gen stuff, you can sort of replay. The Aliens Dark Descent doesn't have that. So, there's a limited amount of replayability, which is kind of a faint criticism in reality. And then for me personally, it's sort of a double whammy on the old brain, because you get that nice hit to your survival horror cortex of like, you go into a room, you look around, there's a health pack, there's ammo, you get to be a little goblin and pick everything up, and once you picked it all up, you look for interactables and stuff you can use that give you hints or information or let you complete puzzles or open doors or what have you, and then you get into a fight after so many rooms, and then you get into the like tactical game brain of making small decisions quickly and balancing risk. Because while you don't control your Marines individually, you do control all their abilities. You know, this guy's got a shotgun. This guy can snipe. This guy can yell. Whatever. Doesn't matter. It's just a really you got your chocolate and my peanut butter kind of game. Go on Aliens Dark Descent. It's good. In a way, I found myself compelled to play the game. You know, I'd return my Marines from a mission, hit, end day, they'd get to rest, and it'd be time for another mission, and I'd be like, let's send the boys out again. Let's see what's deeper in this facility. Let's see what else we can find. Not risking my safety, it's risking their safety to see what else is in this alien-filled hellhole. Which, if you think about it, means that I'm Weyland-Yutani. But I think I'm okay with that. Labyrinth of the Demon King. Throughout its runtime, Labyrinth of the Demon King doesn't stop being a horror game. The visuals, the plot, the game's attempts to create tension, you aren't going to stop playing the Kingsfield parentheses creepy that you signed up for. However, beneath that spooky candy shell, there is a center of coziness. Not a pleasant, creamy coziness like the in vogue cozycore genre that's popular at the moment, but a goopy, vaguely unpleasant center of the strawberry grandma candy kind of cozy. It's familiar, welcoming, safe, maybe a bit nostalgic, but also it's a little bit gross. To expound upon this, the opening of the game is a pretty brutal embrace. The first enemies you encounter can be pretty numerous and dangerous. You have a pretty weak weapon, and they will just beat the shit out of you with pieces of broken furniture and kill you real fast. You have a parry, which can be a little tough to time until you get the hang of it, and it's a bit slow because this is a King's Field-like and not a Dark Souls or a Sekiro, so it's a little bit more boomer-paced. So you have to be a little bit more deliberate with what you do. And your juke is respectable, but you can't do it more than once every few seconds without the risk of running your stamina down to nothing. And if you have no stamina, you're fucked. At the beginning of the game, and these trash-wielding goblins are beating your ass, the game seems really hard, and then it hits you with some horror game cilantro. And this is one of those spoilers I'm not going to avoid that I mentioned earlier. The unkillable pursuer enemy. And this will be maybe an hour in for a lot of people, and this is a point where I can see a lot of folks going, you know what? Nah, and dropping it. Fair enough. It can seem a bit masochistic, almost. Like the game is hard, you have no real tools, no resources to your name. This big guy is stinking all over you and beating your ass with his friends. Like, what? Why would you keep playing this? It seems like it wouldn't be unreasonable to stop at this point either, because it's just dorks beating you up, and then their smelly uncle shows up and kills you over and over again, and you don't know what to do or where to go. After you're getting your ass beat for a while, you don't really know where to go or what to do. You do have a map, and it's a slightly imprecise. It shows you what section or room you're in, but not exactly where you're standing. So sometimes it can be easy to get turned around. Your pursuer can just teleport into places. Being near him too long will kill you, flat out. It can be not much of a joke. But if you stick with it a little longer and kind of get past the first few puzzles, first few sections, you kind of start to notice some stuff. Death is fake, like a lot of these games. You get killed, and you go back to the last save point you touched. Okay. The enemies, all these guys beating with furniture, also can hit each other and will start to infight. It's pretty easy to make this happen. You'll pick up their patterns relatively quickly anyway, but also getting them to bop each other and start fighting each other to the death, not too hard, especially if you're a Doom pro. Soon after that, you'll figure out that it's not too hard to get them to hit their uncle or vice versa and start a big old brawl with the unkillable pursuer, which they can't kill him either, but he can kill them, and that buys you time to mosey on down the path and do whatever it is you got to do. If you are a horror games veteran, you will probably try the classic pursuer enemy strategy of just jog right on by, and you'll find out that works here too. Our big man is not particularly fast and just won't be able to catch up with you, and you can just leave. And if you once you've got these couple of things in mind, you'll get through the starting enemies. You'll be out the back door of the first area. There'll be a weird hole, and suddenly you're in a tea house. And once you make it to this tea house, you're in the heart of Labyrinth of the Demon King. And this is where I went from, this game's kind of neat, to I really loving it. It's got all the usual hubbery, right? Like a merchant, a storage chest, a blacksmith, a save point. The thing that got me is that in the middle of the room, there is a table at which you can make some tea. And when you sit down at this table to make tea, it's not just, you're healed, or hey, here's an item that respawns. It is a multi-step process. You sit down, it's 2 scoops of matcha. Then you add the hot water. Then you stir it with the whisk. Then you pick up the tea. Then you drink the tea. Then you set the cup back down. Then you stand back up. Each of these requires its own click or button press. And it doesn't take very long. It takes about a minute or so total. It's not onerous, but you do have to stop and do it. And it fully heals you, and you get tea to take with you. It is always worth your time to do it. And this is sort of where I feel like Labyrinth of the Demon King sort of gives the game away as to what it is really like. It is kind of strange to say, but this little tea ritual is like refreshing. Any point in the game you come back here, you do your tea ritual, you get your free heals, and just that minute of break from having to do anything else is like a small mental boost. As I said, once you kind of start seeing the workings, Labyrinth of the Demon King is, I would not call it an easy game, but a lot of the difficulty is illusory. Once you kind of see how it works and you kind of get the flow of it, it's no longer as hard as it seemed. The enemies seem intimidating, but once you kind of watch them work a bit, you're like, oh, that's all this is. That's all this does. That's all that can happen here, and you're fine. The bosses are largely more bluster than dangerous, and usually for them you have enough consumables that it's not a big deal. Very quickly sort of reveals that to you that, hey, this is still a horror game. It's still a King's Field. It is still trying to, marry those two vibes and be a bit mean and a bit punishing, but it is not as cruel as it seems out of the gate. And this is another one of those spoiler moments, but when you play Labyrinth of the Demon King through and you make it back to the New Game Plus and you kind of restart and you meet the characters again and they acknowledge, hey, you're back, and the game is sort of more open the second time through, and you make it back to the tea house and your pals are there and you greet them again and you're like, oh, I've got to do this again. It's all the same stuff I've got to do again, the same enemies, the same puzzles, but it seems all a lot less intimidating because like you can go straight to your hangout, your clubhouse. All your little buds are here, including your disgusting Kappa blacksmith friend who I want to give a swirly, not because I want to bully him. His head is just so disgusting. I feel like it would be doing him a favor. Like, that has to be the fastest way to clean his gross head. This is what has kept Labyrinth of the Demon King in my head since I finished it, is this little place in the middle, literally in the middle of the game. There's this quiet little tea house where the friendly NPCs hang out, and as I said, the difficulty is largely fake. You get a spell to return here at any point for free. The spell can be used as often as you like. Death, as I said, doesn't really matter. The enemies are not as hard as they seem. And so there is a shift in mindset where it becomes less of, I'm in this horrible demon labyrinth, castle full of awful things, and becomes, oh, this is closer to going to work. And I know describing a game as going to work sounds like a slam, but this game is fun. The combat is good. Like the visuals, kind of the lo-fi retro horror aesthetic is good. I like the plot and the various little characters and stuff. It's a good game, and not too long, but it's a good time. The New Game Plus introduces a lot of new stuff that's fun to mess around with. But there's sort of this underlying like horror of exhaustion, the horror of like yeah, this seems bad at first, but once you kind of learn the ropes, it is not as bad as you think because you can handle it. And then once you start being able to handle it and you kind of get to know the other people that are there, you're like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. And it's not the first time. The second time, what about the 100th time, the 1000th time? And that's kind of what the game is about. Not so much the overwhelming horror of, this monster-filled maze is an insurmountable, pit of evil and despair, but more the just being in here fucking sucks and you can't leave and you got to keep doing the thing. And you got to keep, putting the keys in the keyholes and fighting the goblins and melting the flesh door with salt. But, when it sucks, you can at least teleport back to the tea house and have a cup of tea and talk to the disgusting Kappa. So at least, there's some respite in the middle of all of this. And it may just be more to my state of mind or state of life or everybody's state of mind and state of life. But that's why this one hit for me, is just this sort of sense of community at the center of this just unpleasant drudgery. Nine Souls. Parrying in 2D just hits better. It just hits better. It just hits better. It just hits. When I finished Nine Souls early in the year, it seemed like a goaty juggernaut. Like, you got parries. You got a cat that smokes weed. You got a big guy you can feed garbage to. You got some of Red Candle's great horror work in there. You got a banger credits track that one time came on in the car while I was giving a coworker a ride, and they were like, what even is this? And I had to say, oh, it's a song from a video game. It's one of my favorite, kind of Metroidvanias. So naturally, another banger came out later in the year and kind of knocked it off his perch. And a lot of what I like about Nine Souls is nothing particularly deep. I like the art, I like the characters, the music, gameplay's fun. Like I said, learning the fights, the parrying was very satisfying. It was just a good time. I just enjoyed playing through it. Not a lot to it. The one addendum to that is, and then not exclusive to Nine Souls, but it was one of my favorite sort of versions of an activity this year was Nine Souls, and that is getting to watch friends play through it after I had beaten it. And not for the sort of sadistic reason of being like, oh, this game is difficult, now I get to watch you fail and get to watch you struggle, but more of the getting to watch my friends approach a thing that I've already done and see how they approach it differently. What different loadouts do they choose? Where do they have a harder time than I did? Where do they have an easier time than I did? I love to see this. And, Nine Souls is, at its core, relatively simple. You move through the map, you parry stuff that's in your way, you get the Metroidvania upgrades. Not a lot to it. So getting to watch other people sort of, especially the bosses, how do they learn? Which particular patterns or attacks were harder for them versus harder for me? I like seeing it. I think it's just an enjoyable time to kind of watch that play out. And I think sometimes in those scenarios, there is that subtext of you finished a game, you're watching a pal play it. I try not to backseat too much unless my friend asks for it, or I know they're the kind of person who prefers to have, some hints or some guidance on certain things. Otherwise, I keep my mouth shut. But there is the, kind of the audience expectation of they're doing something. If they lose, they're struggling of oh, or am I judging them? No. I might joke about it, but no. For me, it's just fascinating to watch another person work at a puzzle, work at a challenge, see what they do, see how they improve. And it's my favorite iteration of this is getting to watch my friends climb in competitive games. Watching my partner play up the ladder in Valorant, watching my friends, do the ladder in fighting games. But those are much more long-term projects, whereas in Nine Souls, they can go from encountering to beating a boss in one hangout, and I can watch it sort of happen real time live. It's great. I love it. I also love that cat's got a boba strapped to his belly. Lies of P Overture. Previously on Game of the Year list, I had said that despite all odds, the dumbass Pinocchio Bloodborne game was incredible, and we all had to just keep living our lives in a world where that was true. And I want to take the chance to correct some misconceptions that have rippled in the wake of my statement. This is a good thing. Now, as you have likely surmised, Liza P got some PLC, where our eponymous Fibber gets to go to the zoo. Does it live up to the frankly preposterous standards set by the base game? Yeah, it's good. I played through Lopo in a couple of sittings, and I had a great time. Both of my experience with Liza P, the base game and the DLC, I think it is the best game to kind of follow in FromSoft's lineage in this subgenre, whatever you want to call it, of Souls-likes or, FromSoft game-likes or whatever. Liza P is probably the strongest overall imitator, which is probably the wrong word, because a lot of what I think makes it such a strong child of these games is that it does have the confidence to do its own thing when they felt like that's either what they wanted to do or it would work better. Like in the lead up to Liza P's launch, it had that steeze on it. Here's a trailer for something that is clearly aping a cool popular thing, and just by looking at it, you're like, okay, but I see that you want to make Puppet Bloodborne, but this is going to be mid, right? This is going to be another game that gets to be on the front page of Game Informer and comes out, and it's not even necessarily bad, but it's what was this for? And then it wasn't. In fact, at the risk of being branded an iconoclast again, I would rather play Liza P than Bloodborne at this point. They came with their own ideas, they came with their own style, and it all hangs together pretty well. They did not feel the need to stick to, the sort of self-seriousness that FromSoft often does. They did not feel the need to stick to a lot of the very base assumptions in the gameplay systems. And I think they did a good job. And the DLC sort of continues off of that, which hopefully proves that it wasn't just a fluke, because I felt like the DLC just continued the same quality set by the base game, to the point where, having not played the game since it came out, jumping right into the DLC felt like the base game had not stopped, and it could have just been an extension of the original product, which did mean that I spent the first hour or so just ruthlessly getting my ass kicked until I remembered the buttons, but that's fine. That wasn't recorded and nobody saw it, so it doesn't count. Lopo is, in my eyes, kind of like a very quintessential DLC for one of these things. It's not there to fundamentally change what's there. It's just more toys. It's more toys for the toy chest. You got new weapons. You got new items. There's new enemies and areas. There's new bosses, almost all of which are good. And so it's just more to do in Liza P, more to play with. It's just good. It's just quality. Again, not a lot to say that's insightful other than I just had a good time with this one. What boosts Lopo up the chain and kind of makes it superlative for me is that a lot of similar games, including some of FromSoft's own work, once you get to sort of the end, the last boss, two bosses or so, sometimes they fumble it a bit. They want to keep raising the difficulty, raising the stakes, raising the excitement, and I get that. And they can't always do it. They can't always keep raising it to the end, and so you end with, your Shadow of the Erdtree final boss types, right? Where it's just a little bit over the line and passes into the realm of kind of obnoxious. Where it's I don't fully hate this. In fact, I like most of this, but it's just a couple of the dials went a little too far. And by the time I beat it, I feel relieved that I'm done with it more than I feel like accomplished for winning. A lot of these final bosses, the dials have been pushed just a little bit too far so that by the time I finish the boss, I feel less accomplished for overcoming this very difficult challenge and more just relieved that I can say, ooh, I'm done with this piece of crap. And it's usually a very thin line, and very rarely, a game-ruining thing. It's just always very, very difficult, very narrow margin of balance, and probably very subjective. But I do feel like they hit that hurdle often, and Lopo did not. The last two bosses are tough, but I was just like in it to win it, and I sat there and played them out and won and felt great about it. And they were difficult, but at no point was I like just kind of sighing to myself and being like, ugh, like, did they really have to make it do this? Like, and that's a hard thing to do. And like I said, even like, Shadow of the Erd Tree, an expansion for a game that I love, an expansion that I love, that final boss, at least in its original release, it's been patched since, of course, I felt like they kind of whiffed it a bit. It was just a little bit obnoxious, and they've had much more experience making these than the folks who make Lies of P, so it is very impressive to me that in Lopo they nailed it. Looking forward to the full-on sequel. Verho, Curse of Faces. Verho, Curse of Faces is a game I found to be so endearingly friendly. That might seem a little strange given it's a Kingsley fielder about an isolated kingdom of people cursed to die should they ever see anyone else's face. A place where people go either to solve the mystery, seek glory, to hide from their crimes, what have you. It's full of demons and giant bugs and poison swamps, and sometimes the bugs in the swamps go through the walls and push you into the swamp and kill you. So it's not a great place to be most of the time. Pretty much what you'd expect from games in this genre. While playing Verho, it felt clear to me that it was very aware of the spaces it was playing in, and it was aware that the player was aware that it was aware. And often the game came across as a bit impatient and giddy in a way to do things, to show the player things. And I mean this in a positive sense. Enemies that ambush the player, but the ambushes usually aren't particularly good. You can usually see them coming. And if you are at all familiar, you can kind of be like, oh, there's an ambush coming. Oh, yep, there's the enemy. You can get a good look at him. You can plan it out, how to deal with it. But, it is there. The enemies will sometimes try to surprise you. And this sounds kind of insulting. Like I was saying, Verho is amateurish, the level design is poor, the enemy placement is thoughtless. But that doesn't seem to be true. It's not that the ambushes aren't placed with intent. It's more that they want you to know they're coming anyway. Like, the point of the ambush is not to surprise you with the ambush, it's to let you be excited that an ambush is coming. And you can always be inattentive and still get got. That did happen to me, I won't lie, this time. But most of the time I could feel or see when they were coming. And so often, instead of an ambush, what you get is a time to gawk at the enemy models. And a lot of them are real fun. There's a lot of good little goobers in this game. My favorite being the Bone Titan, which is a giant Halloween-ass enemy. Like a big divot comes out of the ground, like 12, 15 feet tall. It's got a lamppost on its back and like a gravestone. And it can use like vines as tentacles and shoot rocks at you. And almost completely harmless. Very little ability to actually hurt you in any way, despite looking intimidating and trying to surprise you. But just so charming. If you are familiar with the concept of Doom Cute, this might be like a King's Field Cute, or maybe even Souls Cute. A lot of things in this game are trying to invoke the visual language or the game design language of these games, and they're doing a good job of it, but they are not trying to use it to own your ass, trying to use it to delight you, and almost in a way like a kid showing you their drawing. And again, this sounds like I'm insulting Verho and calling it, a work of a child or, something to that effect. But I am not. This is well done, in my opinion. It is compelling. It is just very, very excited to be here. Like many of the enemies, you see it, some kind of gubbin, some kind of monster, you look at it. Oftentimes you can kind of guess what they'll do by looking at them, and they'll try to kill you if they can, and if they can, they will. You can't take very many hits. You will die easily in Verho. Usually they just sort of, if you're paying attention, they just sort of don't really have the ability a lot of the time. Their enemies are largely not threatening unless you are just a very inexperienced player at this sort of game. It's the equivalent of my cat trying to avoid things by dead weighting. Like, I understand what you're trying to do, and it is cute, but you only weigh 10 pounds, so the strategy just doesn't work here. Items you find are similar. There's lots of very fancy weapons and items just propped up against stumps or sitting in the middle of the room, or otherwise not at all hidden, just right in your way, saying, hey, look, here's a cool hammer that shoots electricity. Hey, here's a bow that is full of blood or something. I don't know. But it's just, they want you to have it. They want you to see it. They want you to pick it up and gawk at it and maybe use it for a bit and then play around with it. Maybe it fits your build or it doesn't. Maybe you just don't like it. You move on to something else. There's a bunch of elemental damage types, and that does seem to matter, but not enough that you can't mess around. And it just wants you to have fun. There is like I said, there is a glee here. And, I played Verho over the course of a few days pretty compulsively because this glee was infectious. Like, I wanted to keep going to see what there would be next because there were secrets. There were surprises. I was kind of interested in the overall story of this thing. But honestly, it was just like the game itself was having fun being a game, which made me want to continue playing it because I was having fun playing that game. And that sounds kind of circular, but that's just what it boils down to. There is a lot to be said about the joy, and I'm often at the forefront of saying games, should be willing to have things that are obtuse, highly secret, hidden from most to maybe virtually all players, things that are very difficult and only really meant for sickos. That's all great. But that doesn't mean you can't make the opposite thing either. And because it's so confident in just showing you stuff and giving you things that when there are secrets, they often feel really earned and really exciting because it's like, oh, if they were willing to give me so much for free, that means they also feel very comfortable hiding things, sometimes very fiendishly. As an example, during the game, you acquire an item that lets you see things that are hidden. Invisible creatures, secret walls, stuff like that, as long as you're holding it in your hand. And on occasion, while holding this, and I kept it equipped for a large chunk of the game, a torch would appear. Just random places, a green torch would just appear in front of me, and I would light them when I encountered them. And I never learned what that did, if anything. I don't know how many I missed or what, but they're there. There were other secrets that I never really found. There was a couple, I think, quest lines for characters that I never wrapped up. So there were still things to find. It was not a straight line game with no secrets, and nothing to explore. But it felt like it, because it was so willing to be so open with most of it, that I could work the actual secrets with confidence. It did not have to have a sliding scale of secrets from this one wall in the middle of nowhere is randomly bombable to get in and find a secret to, this clearly marked secret is a secret. It could just be like, we put secrets how we wanted, where we wanted, find them or don't. And I like that. As I get increasingly older, I am falling more into the secret should be secret. You should not necessarily come to a game and expect to be able to find everything in it in one playthrough on your first go. And Verho seems to agree. As I've kind of gestured at over this, don't think that there is not craft at play here. There is a lot of great enemy design, lots of cool areas, good weapons. It feels like there is a lot of different things you can do with your build, and there's both stuff for builds that are a bit more spread out, as well as, there were spells that just would have taken dozens and dozens and dozens of more points in intelligence, or weapons that have taken more points in strength than I had to spend. You have to go all in on some of these to access some of the real specialized stuff. So there's lots to mess around with if that's kind of your thing. There was a double bluff due to my own lack of paying attention, got me with a Dark Souls trick that they telegraphed, and I said, oh, haha, you got me. Very funny. It was my fault for not paying attention. And they used that trick to fucking double cross me with a Demon Souls trick. And I'm like, you fuckers. And despite it being, friendly and, a lot of the enemies being pretty easy to handle and it giving you a lot to work with, it's still a pretty lethal game. You still have to pay attention and engage with the combat and the systems, or you will die, and it will send you back to your last save, and you can lose a lot of progress if you're greedy, which is something I found very often, is that Verho's friendliness and it's that glee at showing you, all the stuff that it had did mask, a little bit of sadism, in that, you would be like, oh, this is cool. Look at this. And you would start to get comfortable, and then it would kill your ass, and you'd go back to your last save and have to do it again. And you would be like, and every time I thought, yeah, that was greedy. I should have known better. I should have walked back and touched the save point. But I didn't, because I was being pulled ahead by that same energy of, let's see what happens next. Let's see what's around the next corner. I can go through one more room. I've got these monsters down. I know what's going on. It'll be okay. And then they got my ass. If you want me to boil this down to a meme format for you, Verho is Kingsfield we've got at home, but at home we can cook. Death Stranding 2. Death Stranding 2 is difficult for me to square. Ever since I went to my friend's house and saw him get the Otacon ending in MGS1, I've been a fan of Kojima. And the mechanically dense, overwrought, fucking dumb things he makes are right up my alley. And I'm well aware he's got a lot of consistent problems as a creator, and they're still very present in Death Stranding 2, so consider this first part also just a blanket. Yep, it's still weird about women over the rest of this. I have another game on the list that is about women, so it balances out. You can't cancel me. I know a lot of women, all right? What I loved about Death Stranding the first was that for a lot of its playtime, it was a mentally restful experience for me. It had the bombast and the wild imagery and the cutscenes where people say whatever the hell they want, and I like that, but it was, as has often been said, it was primarily about moving boxes around. And the box moving was quiet enough that I could just do it, mentally unwind. And over the couple weeks I played it, I felt refreshed from the experience. For Death Stranding 2, this was less true. And in fairness, my personal day-to-day is less stressful now than when it was when Death Stranding 1 came out. And Death Stranding 2 has a lot of what I liked plus more. There's more toys. There's more types of challenge. There's more wacky nonsense. I enjoyed the time I spent on the couch with my cat building the highways, picking up litter to give the VTubers. I enjoy the improvements of the gameplay and how the combat systems felt better and you had more tools to engage with it. There was less friction around it, for better or worse. But there was more of it, and it was more willing to throw you into more of it because in part at least, your weapons were immediately and broadly effective against all enemy types. And so while my main draw was still the loading up a truck full of boxes and building highways, there was just more time in game spent dealing with enemies. And the further I got into the game, the more I was just not interested in that, either in the context of just going from A to B or even in the game's main missions. I would find myself thinking, I don't want to fight these guys. I don't want to fight these BTs. And sometimes you can avoid a fight, but the stealth, it wasn't particularly satisfying either. And so this friction is what I found myself hitting pretty often. The game I wanted to play was more frequently interrupted by the phantom pain of the military action game DNA present. And by weight, like I said, most of it was still the truck box moving stuff. So I got what I wanted. But the ratio had shifted. And I got kept away from my infrastructure game too much. I do like Death Stranding 2 for what it is, even the parts of it that I like less as the first, and it was less therapeutic. But I did get to build a bunch of roads and monorails, and then towards the end of the game, I did get to drive all the way up and down my roads to do one big delivery. That's still sick. In the real world, I do a lot of work that is often in support of others' work. And so in that context, you end up in a lot of situations where you are in meetings or functions or otherwise present for things that don't really have to do with you. You might be shouted out or you might have some small part to say, but really you're there because you are part of that team, but your work and your presence doesn't really have anything to do with what's happening. It's not your show. Your focus isn't there. And this isn't usually a problem, but sometimes, you're tired or you've got something else to do or it's Friday and you'd rather just be elsewhere. And so at the end of Death Stranding 2, you're running along a beach and there's a kaiju fight off to the side. And I kind of felt the same way. Like, it was cool. A lot of the stuff that happened at the end of the game was very fun to watch. But at the same time, I was just like, I kind of don't care as much about this. This isn't my jam. I'm here to deliver the boxes and build the roads and accidentally run over the animals and then get a ticket for it. And I understand sort of the thematic nature of some of this stuff and how it might relate to the plot being told here, but just as playing the game in the moment, there was just this disconnect of a big chunk of the game that's happening here, especially plot wise. It's just like, this isn't really here for me, and I'm enjoying it as like a side thing, but it's like, honestly, it could be a picture-in-picture movie. Like, I saw a monorail to finish up at the time the kaiju fight was happening, and it's like, let me go knock that out while you guys do this real quick. That's more important to me than whatever nonsense you're doing here. And I do, as I said, I do love the Kojima bombast. I do love the nonsense. I'm here all day for bisexual vampires and roller skate bomb builders and psycho mantis or what have you, but you can feel the strain in the game of it trying to be two different things, which I think is intentional. But the reality of that, intentional or no, is that I only really wanted to play one of them most of the time. And the other one ended up being more of a detriment, more so than the first, even though it was a better version of that game than it was in the first one. Because I also like the phantom pain. So it's, in theory, I should like both things, but it's just not what I want to do here. And you could get very video essay about it and be like, well, now you know how Kojima feels. He wants to build this game about building connections with others and doing the work, but people expect him to build these, deep military goof-ass fantasy things. I get that. I've read a fucking book. I know. But there is that sort of nexus at which your point and the game that I'm playing interact. And if you're going to make my time with it worse to make your point better be pretty fucking good. And I don't know that they quite landed that here. Regardless, it's still a fucking good game. Most of the silly stuff, most of the Metal Gearness works most of the time you're playing Death Stranding, and it's still that. So it's a good time. Most of the new toys to deliver packages and let you run faster, jump higher, build bigger buildings, all a good time. The characters expositing at Sam Porter Bridges is still fun. The dumb shit that comes out of their mouths, you still love it. The sort of small interactions you get, like the player who was constantly thumbs-upping my roads the whole time I was playing, Dark Hydra 36 or something to that effect, like, that stuff all still hits. But, in full disclosure, I did find myself at the end of the game coming up on what was pretty clearly the final story missions and trying to decide if I even cared to do them. Because, I was curious about where the plot was going and how they were going to end it, but I didn't really have much hope that it was going to be good enough that I would be like, damn, that was definitely worth it. And to be clear, I don't really think it was. I think that there's a lot of issues in the overall story being told in Death Stranding 2. But I think that says a lot about my experience with the game, is that I think there is maybe a story there of its own in which my Sam Porter Bridges wanted to come to Australia, come to Mexico, deliver the packages, expand the network, build the roads, get people the stuff that they needed, and then go home. And as I mentioned before, my real life, I do a lot of support work for other people who do a lot of human services and social work type things, and that I feel the same way. I come, I do what I can to help them build, and then I want to go home. So maybe Death Stranding 2 hit pretty close to home for me this year. I don't know at this point if I can say how intentional it is by the game as a text, but perhaps it touched on the point of the idea that you, generally, or Sam Porter Bridges, cannot just be a person who does a job that helps. You can't just build the roads. You can't just connect the network. You can't just deliver the packages. You've also got to fight the battles and infiltrate the compounds and solve the mysteries. You've got to do everything because there's always a problem and you always have to fix it. And if you fix it, then there's another one and another one and another one. And you can't live like that. And no one should really expect you to. Again, I encounter people going down that line of thought in person, and I've also done it. And I'd have to tell them and myself the same thing. Like they had to tell me, you can't do everything. And sometimes you have to rest. Because you will rest at some point or another. If you don't choose to do it, then it will happen to you. And it would be difficult, I think, to argue that Death Stranding 2 is a game about compassion fatigue and about burnout and about, working within problems that resist being fully solved, because a lot of the stuff in Death Stranding 2 can be solved. You can finish the road. You can 5-star the various, people's relationships and finish all their missions. You can complete the game story and get rid of the antagonists. But while to repeat myself yet again, like I said, the game itself was enjoyable, still pretty relaxing, but I think as a narrative, this is sort of where it failed me personally. Just this idea that one or a very small number of people just show up and keep solving the problems, keep doing the work, keep saving the day, and specifically Sam bearing the brunt of it, literally carrying the load of it most of the time. And And there is that kind of underlying philosophy of when can you rest? When can you stop? When can you, take more than a moment to enjoy this stuff you've created, this things you've done, and it's when the work's done. Well, this doesn't happen. Tormented Souls 2. So I wanted to put this bit about Tormented Souls 2 before the last few entries here, because this is roughly where it would have went onto the list had it made the list. It didn't, for reasons I'll get into, which might seem kind of confusing, because by putting this in here, it means it did make the list at roughly the spot that it would have made the list if I had put it on the list, which I did, because I'm here talking about it. So this might call into question the nature of lists, or what it means to be on the list or not, or if a numbered list, non-numbered entries are part of the list or just addendums. And I would say, shut up. To give a bit of backstory, I liked Tormented Souls 1 quite a bit. I thought it was a great PS2 bargain bin survival horror throwback. It was sort of exactly what it meant to be. Like, flaws and all just sort of fit right into that slot. I had a good time with it. I was pretty excited for the sequel, and honestly, it exceeded my expectations. It is just straight up a great survival horror game, without the caveats of the budget title PS2 thing. One I would recommend without reservation, really, if you like the genre. Well, one reservation. Rotate your save slots, because you don't want what happened to me to happen to you, which is what's causing me to do this whole rigmarole, which is about 95% of the way through the game, I got soft locked. I completed a puzzle, but could not continue because the game, basically, I think some flags got out of order. It's not important. But I only had one save, and I had saved after the lock and just couldn't continue. When I did a little looking around, it seemed like the developer was aware of the bug. They had hot-fixed a number of other soft locks, so I figured, hey, I'll give them a little while. No big deal. And as of now, they still haven't fixed it. It's a Chilean dev. I don't think they're very large, so, who knows? They'll fix it eventually, I'm sure. Or the game is good. I could just play it again. Recording the footage for this little segment, playing it again, I was like, maybe I will just play this game again. And I might at some point. It is good. I just felt, since I had not actually finished it, it didn't deserve a full spot on the list. That's my call to make, not yours. Tough. It's very unlikely that anything in the very final section would have ruined the game outright. You could argue by putting it in this Phantom Zone entry, I'm not giving it the credit it's due. I'm trapping it in some kind of horrible side dimension filled with rusted machines and seawater, just populated by tortured beings who only understand being hit with a giant sledgehammer made out of trash. Also, in my research of the softlock, I learned that your modern gamer is simply too weak for the genre. Reading some of the forum posts about Tormented Souls 2, many of the posts were cries for more ammo, easier to dodge enemy attacks, more health items. The bosses need more ammo in their arena. Help, I can't beat this. And in my softlock save, I'm flush with resources. I played on the standard difficulty, which is the highest available at your first playthrough. And while you go through, lean periods and flush periods of resources like any survival horror, I never felt that I was in an unwinnable position. So basically, they're all too weak to survive the winter, and they don't deserve anything nice because they were given something nice and they wanted it to be made worse because God fucking forbid they feel any sort of tension or horror other than a ghost jumping out from behind a cabinet or something. This doesn't really have anything to do with the game. I just wanted to take a second to bitch about it. I just want to shout out Tormented Souls 2 because it is sort of a generically named game from a small studio in South America. It deserves eyes on it. It's good work. And it is at risk of being overshadowed by the much more mainstream game this year in the genre of woman finds herself in survival horror situation and thinks, well, better get to clobbering. Silent Hill F. Unfairly, Silent Hill F had a lot riding on it. Unfairly, but perhaps thematically, I'll let a smart person decide that. I'll just tell you that finally someone did good with Silent Hill. It's a little bit rough, which is consistent with the series, but it has been patched to address some of that. I haven't played it after the patch, so I can't speak to any of that. On paper, they fixed several of my personal bugbears, so that does seem positive, specifically around there being just a bit too much combat. I played through on the hard combat difficulty, or the hardest available, at least when you start a new game, and refused to lower it due to gamer stubbornness. But by the end, I was actively telling my partner, more fighting every time a monster appeared on screen, or they would block your path. From what I read in the patch notes, it seems like it's better now for anyone who plays it after that. Maybe the initial audience, including myself, kind of powering through and saying, hey, this didn't really work out. We didn't really like this. And seeing that change made for the next people, even something for trivial like video game combat balance is thematic here. I don't know. I'll let a smart person figure that out. So instead, I'll talk about something on my level, Dark Souls combat. One thing that was stuck in my brain a lot while playing this game is it seemed to be able to fuck with people who played a lot of Souls-esque games in small ways. Just little things like how if you spend all your stamina, it takes a little longer than you feel like it should for her to start recovering stamina, or how dodges are timed, availability of iframes, just a lot of things about Hineko's animations. And you could chalk this all up to, well, it's not a Souls game, dipshit. It's a different game. And yeah, fair enough. But if you'll indulge me for a minute, and you have to, because as mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you close the tab, you lose and I win. I think there is perhaps some more purpose at work here. Because I think these choices are kind of engineered a little bit to play with your muscle memory, your intuition. I think that, if you aren't familiar with Souls games, likely you are not familiar with third-person action games then, so the game will probably be pretty challenging anyway. I have to mention people who are not familiar with the, light, heavy attack, stamina management, dodge button, Souls, Monster Hunter, what have you, probably just haven't played a lot in that genre at all. There probably is not a huge population of people who are into third-person action games, but just not those. Like, maybe some Devil May Cry diehards, but those sickos won't have a problem no matter what. I do have to imagine there's a little bit of intent here. And I do think that this is meant to make controlling Hineko feel just a little bit more uncomfortable, a little bit more oppressive. And your gut reaction might be to be like, oh man, this controls like shit. Why is it like this? Why does it feel bad? And there's the classic, survival horror combat, supposed to be clunky. Silent Hill combat, supposed to be clunky. This is a person. This is a girl. This is not a knight. This is not a super hot puppet twink. She's not Pinocchio. She's not Jack Garland. I would argue maybe she's a little bit of a Jack Garland. I think rather, or in addition to that, maybe it's both, but these choices are aimed at the player, specifically at the player's hands. And not dissimilar, if you are a veteran of your Souls likes, your Dark Soulses, FromSoft and other people, they target your hands too, right? Like every time an enemy jumps up in the air to do a big attack and then just hangs there, or they have combos that they will change up the timing mid-combo or end and start things, they are attacking your muscle memory, your intuition. They are trying to force a reaction out of your hands, even if your brain knows better. And they're doing that here too, just in a different way. In Silent Hill, it's just a little more subtle, I think. Not in the sense that you don't notice it, because you definitely will notice it. Notice that, like, you can get good at the combat. Hineko is a bit of a shit kicker once you kind of get the hang of what's going on, but it is still clunkier. It is still more difficult to manage than your average, protagonist who has a similar control scheme. And you know, maybe this is meant to kind of make you physically feel like this doesn't feel right. This is not how things should be. This is harder for her than it has been for other protagonists, other characters I've controlled. She has less to work with and has to be more deliberate and more patient and more thoughtful about how she uses her resources and more careful. And maybe that's thematic. I don't know. You should ask a smart person. It's hard to say a lot about Caves of Cud, in part because it already says a lot on its own, but it's just a game I think about a lot. Not in like the current hyperfixation way or the way when like something's in the zeitgeist and I'm just trying to really maximize how annoying of a take I can make to irritate people on Discord when I'm bored at work. Rather, in the course of my life, things I encounter or just whatever I'm doing, Caves of Cud just comes up a lot. On Wednesdays, office chatter gets me thinking about Dromad merchants. In my day job, I often literally do give people water. And it's not literally sharing from my own water supply in the same way, but it is kind of a little water ritual, and I do think about that sometimes. When someone says, hey, this person's the goat, I think, is being a horrible seed-throwing goat person worth celebrating? The primary way I judge how successful a video game environment or space is, how much I like it, how absorbing it is how easy it is for me to feel it, how easily I can look at the screen and know what it would feel like for my body to inhabit that space. This is about as subjective as a measurement can get. And I think, at first, it sounds too easy to hit. You look at an ice level, you know what it's like when it's cold outside, boom. You look at the forest level, you've been in the woods, there you go. Water level, you've been to the pool, nailed it. There's a nuance to this for me, and I think that's out of scope in this video, and probably is not interesting to get into deeply, but to cut to the test really comes down to this. A game can suggest a place easily, but to truly invoke a place, as I've experienced it in the real world, does that sense of place linger if I close my eyes, or if I walk away from the game? And several games have hit this bar, but Caves of Cud is the only one I can think of that's done it with such a simple presentation. And Caves of Cud is the only one that's done with places that are so foul. Generally with this particular litmus, it's essentially pulling on nostalgia. Times I went to the beach, times I spent playing with friends in the woods, times I took a nice walk out after a big snow. I haven't literally been to a place like Golgotha, a heaving, oozing, putrid factory, so dense with rot and miasma and crabs that even a turn-based, top-down game, sometimes I can't even tell what the fuck is going on. But I've been to some pretty wretched, stinking, vile places in my life. Kind of the places where, you know, it's not just your senses telling you that this place is gross and you should get out of there, but that you just feel that this place is foul. This is a dangerous place to be, and you should be gone. I've not been to too many of these, but some of the locations in Cud, specifically Golgotha, has brought me back to those memories in exploring them. And I kind of love it for that, and how well realized it is. And I haven't won a game of Cud yet, and I kind of don't care. I haven't made it to the late game even. I'm in no rush. I'll do it eventually. I made it a little further every time I tried, but it just doesn't seem important. A lot of other roguelikes, that's always the goal that's in mind. Oh, I'm going to win. And even if you kind of chunk that goal down as, oh, well, I know I'm not going to win this run, but maybe I can beat the first level. Maybe I can make it further. Maybe I can do this objective or this submission. But in Cud, it's just like, one of these times I'll make it, but I'm not particularly pressed about when. And each time I go, it's just, hey, we're just going to Caves of Cud for a while. And whatever happens, happens. I sort of think about it as like a game I'm just going to revisit constantly forever. In the same way that, like, you may have a favorite book that just comes with you from place to place as you move. That book may move into a new place with you and move out again, and you never once opened it, but you're still glad it's there. The fact that that story exists in that physical form in your home still matters. And Caves of Cud might show up on this list over and over again every year, forever. To the point where, while playing Caves of Qud one of the last times, I had the thought that, and this thought was not entirely unpleasant, although hopefully it is not soon, is that I could see Caves of Qud being the last game that I ever play. Hollow Knight Silksong. I could spend a lot of time here singing the praises of every element of Silksong. My first inclination is just scour the game with praise. Just to find every smallest potential bruise in its flesh, preempt any criticism of it with claims like, oh, the naysayers didn't get it, they're too weak, the game asked them to show some grit and rise to meet it on its level, and they were found wanting, and their attacks in the game are not indicative of its actual quality, but of their inability to access it. That those who do not love Silksong feel that way, not because of an amalgam of their experience with the game and their personal preference and tastes and the context of the time in which they played it that led them to this opinion naturally, but because they are fundamentally unworthy and reside in purgatory where Hornet's love does not reach them. But really, it comes down to this. Silksong feels right in my hands. During the time I was playing Silksong, when I wasn't playing Silksong, my hands were like, why aren't you playing Silksong? When I was playing other games, I just felt like, why am I not controlling Hornet right now? Sometimes I would be playing Silksong and I would be tired, ready to go to bed, ready to stop playing for the day or at least for that session, but I would just still be maneuvering Hornet around the game world because I did not want to stop physically piloting her through the game space, even though I no longer had any focus to spend on actually doing things in the game. Rather than a laundry list of good qualities of Silksong, I would like to discuss something I thought about a lot while playing the game, which is a question that came to mind, which is, should Team Cherry compromise? Which, again, is not a new take, but though I like to play the hyperbolic gatekeeper online, in real life I generally don't care how people want to approach the games that they play. I think options are good. Easy modes, accessibility, cheats, kind of whatever makes people happy. It doesn't matter. I think at the end of the day, the value you get out of doing these things is intrinsic. And if you don't have that drive, and you're just here to see it, or you just want to see the narrative, or you're there for a reason that doesn't involve the mechanical difficulty, then who cares? Just play it how you like. It makes no difference. When I raided in Final Fantasy XIV, the similar discourse went around over and over again. Should you use add-ons? Should you use tools? Is this cheating? Is that cheating? Should people be allowed to pay for carries? And at the end of the day, I was like, I simply don't care. I'm here to do it because I want to do it. I want to be able to beat it. There's really not an easy way to prove if any other person has or hasn't done it unless you were there at the time, so I don't care. I know that I did it. That's the end of what I care about. And I usually feel kind of the same way, but for Silksong, I have to admit, the concern did bubble up a little bit. I was loving it so much, and it was molding onto me so perfectly that the concern did appear. If Team Cherry started to compromise for people who were having a hard time, if they started making changes, if they started altering their vision because some people were finding the game too difficult or too obtuse or too unapproachable, would that damage the thing that I loved? Would that break it for me? Was the magic here so fragile that if they started moving pieces around or adjusting numbers, it would get just that little bit less compelling, and it would go from this thing that I was entranced by to just a pretty good Metroidvania, which is how I felt about the first Hollow Knight. And while I don't really have any actual desire to gatekeep, I found myself thinking like, hey, maybe if this thing is this good and it was what the developers wanted to release, and you picked it up and it wasn't for you, you find it off-putting for one way or another, maybe it's okay to just move on. Maybe you should say, I didn't like this. This one wasn't for me, rather than push for a change or hope that they, quote unquote, fix something about the experience. Blech. Team Cherry was unlikely to say, oh, let's make a bunch of huge changes. Actually, you're right. And kneecap their own game 2 weeks after release because some people got stuck on a boss. That wasn't going to happen. But the fact that I had the thought was what got me thinking. But because Silksong is so good, this is already sort of tackled in the game itself, right at the beginning. Hornet comes across a gate, a little bug, Sherma banging his bell, can't get through the gate because that doesn't do anything. And Hornet can climb up and around and fight some enemies and fall on some spikes and then immediately walk onto those same spikes again because of how it loads you back up right next to the spikes. And then, she makes her way around to the gate switch and opens it. And Sherma gets right on through. And it doesn't really matter either way to Hornet. And I think that, while Sherma's presence in the story does matter, this moment taken on its own, like to Hornet, opening that gate is inconsequential. You're going that way anyway, and hitting that switch or not maybe takes a second. It doesn't matter what you do, and it helps this little person out, and that's often what all these debates kind of boil down to in the end, is that you may face some sort of extremely, almost imperceptibly minor change or inconvenience that ends up helping someone do something they couldn't before. The other thing that Silksong helped me with is playing through it was clarifying. I had a similar experience with the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 last year, in that I played through Silksong and then immediately was able to cut a lot of games from my backlog because they just didn't seem worth my time after playing Silksong. And that's not to say these games were necessarily bad, but it was just, there just didn't seem to be much to get out of them at that point. I had a very clear view of you only have so much time to spend on this stuff, and these ones just aren't of enough interest to me to do it. And as someone who spent the past little while sort of reevaluating and kind of redefining their relationship with the medium, it was a big help. To pogo off the Nine Souls section about liking to see how my friends approach games, I got to see that with Nine Souls, but with everybody, and that's always fun. The zeitgeist is obviously nothing new, but with your similar things like with Elden Ring or other games which kind of everyone ends up playing at once, and you get to sort of watch everyone play through it and talk about various pain points, various troublesome things that they hit. It's always a blast because a lot of times, these experiences are really atomized. We might all play the same games, but, on our own or in small groups at our own pace. And so even though we're still doing that, the fact that it's kind of broadly happening at once and everyone's sort of talking about it is always a nice treat. And then everyone gets stuck on some easy-ass shit like the jungle beast fly, and you get to be like, what are y'all talking about? It does two things. And you get to be rude about it for like a week. But as to why Silksong's here at the top, I think it's about as close to perfect as a game I've ever played. It's pretty much that simple. I'm not going to spend a bunch of your time trying to break down all the elements and just say that they're all good or try to justify or work out why I think they're all good. I just think it's pretty damn close to perfect. And that near perfection really helped highlight a question which might be obvious to a lot of people, but just based on the folks that I know and observations of their habits, it might not be. Which is spending a little more time asking, like, why is this worth playing? Why is this worth pursuing? Because a lot of us, and I'm definitely including myself in this, will play stuff, out of a sense of novelty or obligation or completionism, but we don't ask, like, what do I really get out of this? What does this bring to the table for me? How will I walk away somehow improved? And that could mean anything. But there's a lot of stuff, especially myself and my cohort, we're hella old. We've been around the block with these games a lot. Just something being new is no longer enough for it to be interesting. And there's a lot of games that are not bad by any stretch of the imagination. They are not poorly made or unworthy of play for a lot of folks. But for myself and the people in the same boat, it's just, I don't need to do this again. I've seen it before. And I can pass on it this time because there's nothing new here for me. There's nothing additive here for me. And I think that's fine, but I do think there's a big element of FOMO latent in people like myself who grew up with the medium, going from, these early consoles to now, watching the technology and the types of game and the amount of games balloon outward. And just being like, the next big thing could be fucking anything. And if you kind of missed it, then you might have missed like something transformative. But I don't think that's been true for a while. Not to say there's not wild, cool shit being made and stuff that's out there that you should definitely give a shot, but just that you have a lot more leeway to be selective now, especially if you are well-read, so to speak. I see a lot of folks that I know playing stuff or buying stuff that they may like well enough, but they play it and it's essentially disposable, which on its own is not a problem either, necessarily, but you ask them, why'd you do that instead of doing something that might have been a bit more fulfilling? And they did it because of what they do. It was a new Metroidvania, they played it. It was a new this, they played it. It was on their backlog. They've been meaning to get to it for a while, and it's playing Silksong for me was one of these things where it's loosened one of those shackles, one of those mental constructs of, oh, I've got to do this, oh, I've got to get to this, oh, I have this on my backlog. Nah. Free yourself from these obligations. Plus, did I mention it feels really good to fucking play? Hornet moves around like a bullet by the end of the game. Well, thanks for watching. If you watched all of this or some of it, or you listened to it on a second screen, or you fell asleep and it played, you know, whatever. I don't care. Thanks for being here. This was just an experiment for me to learn how to do some of this stuff. I had fun, and that's what matters. So everything else is gravy. Shout out to my friends who encouraged me to do this instead of doing what I would usually do, which is nothing. Shout out to the Valve Corporation and Gabe Newell for banning me sort of from Steam for 6 weeks, which sent me into a weird thought spiral about my relationship with games, which sort of led to this wanting to make a video. Thanks, y'all. Great work. I have a list of video ideas I'd like to make. Since I had fun doing this, hopefully I'll make some more. They'll all be sort of loose, rambling trains of thought about something that got stuck in my head like a lot of these were. So if you liked that, great. There's more coming. If you didn't like that or you thought they could use more structure, too bad, probably. If you're hoping for more like actual gameplay videos, clip compilations, like sick ownage headshot pranks or something, let me know in the comments. I'm not going to make them, but you can just tell me if you want. That's fine. If you would like to indulge me slightly further, I would say for 2026, set yourself a goal of writing some essay about a game you play this year. Not a review or a summary or like a book report. Just an essay about something about the game and how it relates to you as a person. I would love to read these if you do this. So if you do this, send them my way. If you're comfortable with that, that would be awesome. Have a good night, gamers.